This is the Block World Podcast. And today we are diving into an announcement that, genuinely feels like it stops the clock on the future of electric mobility.
Yeah.
We've got an official statement and a really deep technical dive from a company called Donut Lab. And they're talking about what they call the world's first all-solid-state battery in production vehicles.
It's a huge claim. I mean, it's not just an announcement. It's a seismic shift if these claims actually hold true. And, we have to approach it with a level of critical skepticism.
Oh, absolutely.
For years, solid-state batteries, or SSBs, have been this, mythical beast of electrification. It's always been the 2030 or 2035 promise that would finally fix all of lithium-ion's compromises. Everyone knows the promise: higher density, better safety.
Right, but every single attempt we've seen, every prototype, every limited rollout has come with this massive asterisk next to it. You could solve for density, but then the cycle life was just terrible. The battery would degrade in months.
Or the charge speed was agonizingly slow. You could get safety, but it took an hour to charge.
Exactly. Or the cost was just so prohibitive that it was locked into hyper niche or defense markets, not for the average person.
Precisely. We've been living in this world of fundamental trade-offs in battery engineering. So the mission of this deep dive is to unpack this very specific, very audacious claim. Donut Lab is saying this tech is available today in production vehicles, and get this, it comes with no compromises whatsoever.
That's the part that's hard to believe. They're saying they solved all of them at the same time.
Simultaneously. Which, from a material science perspective, is almost unheard of.
Okay, so that's the challenge we're tackling. We're going to scrutinize the headline specs, that 400 watt-hours per kilogram figure, the unbelievable cycle life, the 5-minute charging, and then, critically, we're going to validate their production claims by looking at the real-world partner case studies they provided. Because if this is legitimate, and if it's scalable, it doesn't just transform the EV market. It fundamentally changes the entire global market for electricity storage, from, transport to grid infrastructure.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this and jump right into section 1. Setting this new baseline, we have to start with the 4 core metrics that traditionally limit, standard lithium-ion batteries and see how Donut Battery claims to have solved them all at once.
And when we talk limitations, we're really talking about physics and chemistry that forces engineers into this zero-sum game. You can tweak the recipe for speed, but you sacrifice longevity. You boost density, but then you compromise on safety and thermal stability. Donut Lab says they're just eliminating that choice entirely.
A bold claim.
Let's start with the big one, the one that sells cars. Energy density. This is what translates directly to vehicle range and overall weight. The key figure they are shouting about is 400 watt-hours per kilogram.
Okay, so to put that in perspective for everyone listening, energy density is basically a measure of how much energy you can cram into a given mass. 1 watt-hour per kilogram means 1 watt of power for 1 hour from 1 kilogram of battery. Hitting 400 is, it's an engineering triumph.
So why is that number so much better than what we have in cars today?
Well, modern high-performance production Li-ion batteries right now are pushing maybe 250 to 300 waste kilograms, but that's at the cell level.
Ah, okay, the cell level. That's a key distinction.
It's a huge distinction. Once you bundle thousands of those cells together and you add all the necessary stuff, the cooling systems, the heavy steel casings, the wiring, fire suppression, the battery management systems, all of that adds mass but holds zero energy. So the pack level density usually drops way down, often to around 180 to 220 waste kilograms.
So if Donut Lab is hitting 400 waste kilograms, even if that's at the cell level, the final pack level number would still be just dramatically higher than anything on the road today.
Exactly. Even if you factor in the standard packaging overhead, their pack should be capable of densities in the high 300s. And that translates to a massive reduction in the heaviest single component of the EV, the battery pack. We're talking 30 to 40% lighter for the same amount of energy.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting on the practical side for car designers. What's the real-world impact of that 400 weightage kilogram? This figure gives them radical design freedom. Donut Lab is essentially giving builders 2 choices. You can either build an EV with, say, a 1,000-kilometer range at the same weight as a 600-kilometer EV today.
Or, and this is the choice that I think is often overlooked but is architecturally transformative, you build the same range vehicle, say 600 kilometers, but you do it with a much, much lighter and smaller pack. So if you have a 100-kilowatt pack today that weighs 500 kilograms, swapping in this donut battery doesn't just cut weight. It frees up space, and it reduces the mass load on the entire chassis.
Right, and that reduction in weight has this, like, cascading effect across the whole vehicle, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Think about it from an engineering perspective. A lighter, smaller pack improves overall vehicle efficiency because you're moving less mass. It improves performance. It improves handling because your center of gravity can be lower and better distributed. It even reduces wear and tear on heavy components like your tires and suspension.
It changes the whole psychological contract of an EV. It's no longer about trading gasoline for a big, heavy box of compromises. We're talking about creating a vehicle that's just fundamentally superior in its basic handling and its running costs.
And Donut Lab CEO Marco Letomacchi, he summarized this perfectly. He said their obsession is making electric vehicles so good that combustion becomes irrelevant. Not just, greener or almost as good, but better in every single way. This level of density is what makes that claim possible. You get radical performance gains without the trade-offs. It's engineering liberty.
Okay, so if density is solved, the next huge hurdle has always been the clock and the calendar. How does Donut Lab tackle the charging speed and the lifespan paradox? This has always been the Achilles heel of Li-ion.
Yeah.
You can have fast charging, but you kill the battery.
So Donut Lab claims they achieve the refueling dream, charging from 0 to full in as low as 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes? That's the number that just eliminates range anxiety, completely closes the convenience gap with a gas pump. But the real breakthrough, I think, is buried in the operational details.
Which is?
They explicitly state that full charge to 100% and full discharge down to 0% are safe, repeatable, and expected daily operations.
Okay, so that means the anxiety that every EV owner lives with, that constant voice in your head telling you to limit charging to 80% to protect the battery's health, that's just gone. You can use the full capacity of your car every single day without any penalty.
Which begs the question, why is that possible? Traditional Li-ion suffers at the extremes because the internal structure degrades. You get things like lithium plating, especially during fast charging, or the electrode materials literally crack from volume changes.
And a solid-state electrolyte fundamentally changes that mechanism, right? The solid structure is just much more resistant to those physical changes.
Exactly. The solid electrolyte acts as a physical barrier. It helps suppress something called dendrite growth, which we'll get into more in a bit, and it just provides much greater chemical stability overall. And the longevity claim reinforces this. They say the battery is designed for 100,000 cycles.
Wait, hold on. Let's stop right there. 100,000 cycles. That just strains belief. What's the catch? Is there fine print on, depth of discharge or temperature? Because standard Li-ion warranties are, 1,500, maybe 2,000 cycles for a car? And that's often just warranting 70% capacity after 8 or 10 years.
And that's the essential point. In the source material we have, there is no fine print. The claim of 100,000 cycles is based on the intrinsic stability of the chemistry. This isn't an incremental improvement from 2,000 to, say, 5,000 cycles. This is an entirely different category of longevity.
Okay, let's put 100,000 cycles into context for our listeners. If you're an average driver with a 600-kilometer EV and you charge it once every 3 days, 100,000 cycles would give you roughly 821 years of use.
It's absurd. And even if you were running a heavy-duty taxi or a logistics fleet, fast charging the vehicle twice a day, every single day, that's still 137 years of operational life. The battery, in that scenario, far outlasts the vehicle, the charging station, probably the road it's driving on.
So what does that mean for the big picture?
It fundamentally transforms the total cost of ownership, or TCO. For fleet managers, that is the only metric that matters.
Right, TCO. The full accounting of purchase price, maintenance, fuel, and crucially residual value. If the battery is no longer the thing that limits the lifespan, its residual value must be incredible.
Correct. It massively increases the residual value and allows for secondary and even tertiary uses for the battery pack. For logistics, where heavy duty cycles and constant fast charging are mandatory, this is the holy grail. And it has profound implications for grid storage because suddenly your stationary energy solution has a lifespan measured in geological time, not a decade. The Li-ion reality is that batteries age. Donut Battery claims to have just removed that constraint entirely.
The battery doesn't age, or at least its degradation is so low that it's just irrelevant to the life of the product it's in. That's mind-bending for anyone who's ever owned a smartphone.
Okay, now let's look at the financial and logistical piece. Because if it's technologically flawless and lasts forever, but it costs 5 times as much as Li-ion, it just stays in niche luxury markets.
Right, and this is where the claim gets truly audacious. Donut Lab is adamant. The battery is structurally and from day one lower cost than lithium-ion at the pack level.
Claiming lower costs from day one that's a big statement. We know solid-state materials often involve exotic manufacturing processes that should drive costs up initially. So how do they justify that cost claim based on materials, not just, future when we hit volume projections?
Their sources suggest it's about structural simplicity and the materials themselves. By removing all the complex, heavy, expensive stuff you need for liquid electrolytes, the cooling, the safety systems, the heavy casing, they reduce the cost of the pack dramatically.
And that cost is just critical for mass adoption. If you want combustion to become irrelevant, like their CEO said, the electric alternative can't be a luxury technology. But the material science behind the cost is arguably even more important. This gets into supply chain resilience.
You're talking about the geopolitical component, the resource scarcity that plagues EV manufacturing today.
Exactly. They state the battery is built on 100% green and abundant materials with global availability. It has no reliance on rare or geopolitically sensitive resources. This is enormous. This might be the sleeper story of the whole announcement.
Okay, so unpack that. Why is that geopolitical point so important right now? What are those sensitive resources they're avoiding?
Today, the whole EV transition is bottlenecked by the sourcing of materials like cobalt, nickel, and certain types of graphite. Cobalt is often mined in ethically questionable circumstances, and it's highly concentrated in just a few places. Nickel is volatile. Lithium itself requires complex extraction.
So by using materials that are abundant and globally available, which suggests things like sodium or iron, maybe silicon, they completely decouple the energy transition from these really volatile supply chains.
Precisely. Abundant materials let the global EV transition accelerate exponentially. It means you can build these batteries in Europe or the US with locally sourced materials. You remove supply chain dependency, you shield yourself from price shocks, and you eliminate the ethical sourcing concerns. This ensures the technology is truly accessible for mass adoption globally. It's basically a national security asset disguised as a battery.
Okay, so just to sum up this first section, we've got 400 watt-scale greens for more range and less weight, charging in 5 minutes to 100%, 100,000 cycles for longevity, and it's cheaper than lithium, built on common safe materials. That is a combination that frankly sounds too good to be true, which leads us to section 2. How do they prove this works in the real world?
Yeah, this section addresses that skepticism head-on. The motto here is, the real world is not a lab, and a battery has to be bulletproof. It has to be robust, and above all, it has to be intrinsically safe.
Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room first. Fire risk. We've all seen the videos of an EV battery fire. It's intense, it's hard to put out, and it's usually from thermal runaway. Traditional ion risk shoots up at high temps, around 60 to 80 degrees Celsius. Donut Battery says they've addressed the root causes of fires by design.
And they detail exactly how. First and foremost, no flammable liquid electrolytes. That's the primary fuel source for a lithium fire. If the battery is damaged or overheats, there's just no liquid organic solvent to vaporize and ignite.
So that eliminates the most common failure mode right off the bat. But what about the chain reaction itself?
That leads to their second point. No thermal runaway chains. In a normal lithium pack, when one cell fails, the heat and gas cause its neighbors to fail in this catastrophic domino effect. But because their electrolyte is solid and non-flammable, that chemical reaction that spreads from cell to cell is eliminated or severely limited. It compartmentalizes the energy.
And the third major risk factor they claim to have solved is the physical degradation of the cell.
Right, the dendrite issue. Donut Lab claims no metallic dendrites that cause internal shorts. Dendrites are these microscopic, needle-like structures of lithium that grow through the electrolyte during charging. If one penetrates the separator in a lithium cell, it causes an internal short. That short creates localized heat, which is the ignition trigger for the flammable liquid.
So safety isn't some added feature that requires complex hardware like a cooling jacket or a ton of sensors. It's just baked into the core chemistry of the battery itself.
And that intrinsic safety is crucial for OEM confidence. When a major car company is betting billions on an electric platform, they need products that minimize liability. Safer products, lower risk of recalls, building trust with customers, regulators, and importantly, insurance companies.
Yeah, insurance costs for EV fleets have been a growing problem. If the battery won't ignite and burst into flames when damaged, that single promise changes the entire regulatory and insurance landscape.
And think about the packaging. If you remove the risk of thermal runaway, you can reduce all the protective steel and complex cooling systems, which ties directly back to the cost reduction and that 400 watt-case skib density figure. Safety isn't a trade-off here. It's a structural benefit.
It certainly makes the conversation with the fire marshal a lot easier. But safety isn't the only real-world concern. Performance has to be consistent. Which brings us to temperature independence.
Ah, yes. The dreaded asterisk of EV ownership. Every EV owner knows this feeling. Cold weather just steals your range. If you live in Canada or Scandinavia, you might lose 30–40% of your range when it gets below freezing. And conversely, high heat causes faster degradation. So whether you live in Norway or Arizona, your battery performance is inherently inconsistent.
And Donut Lab says they engineered the battery to remove that asterisk entirely. They provide some validation testing results that are, frankly, just astonishing.
Let's talk specifics. For cool performance, the battery was tested at -30°C, that's deep freeze territory. And at that temperature, the battery retains over 99% of its capacity.
Over 99%. It virtually eliminates the biggest complaint about EV ownership in cold climates. All that energy is still there, ready to go.
The assumption here is that their solid electrolyte has extremely stable ion conductivity, even at very low temperatures, which has been the primary challenge for most solid-state chemistries. If they've solved that low-temp conductivity problem, they've solved a huge hurdle that has kept a lot of other solid-state solutions in the lab.
And it holds up in the other direction, too, with extreme heat.
Yes. For high-temperature performance, they tested it beyond 100°C. That's the boiling point of water. And capacity retention remains at over 99%. With no signs of ignition or degradation.
That is the definition of temperature independence. We're talking about consistent performance from deep freeze to boiling hot. It removes the geographical constraints on EV adoption.
What stands out to me is not just the high number or the low number, but the consistency. If you're running a heavy transport fleet or a mission-critical military platform, which we'll get to, you cannot have variables. This level of stability is non-negotiable for those kinds of demanding use cases.
Okay, so we've established the zero-compromise performance on paper and the extreme resilience and safety in testing. Now we have to move to the most critical section, the part that proves this isn't just vaporware. Is this actually available today? It's time for the proof in production.
And this is the section that validates the whole story. The sources make a really strong point here. Donut Lab waited to announce this until the technology was fully tested, validated, and already operating in vehicles through strategic partnerships. That jump from lab promise to production reality is what sets this apart.
And the company leading the charge on this is Verge Motorcycles. They're calling themselves the world's first production vehicle powered by an all-solid-state battery. And they say they're shipping in Q1 2026. This isn't a concept car, it's a scheduled production timeline.
This is history in the making for the two-wheeler industry, a segment that really struggles with weight and packaging. Verge already had a high-performance bike that held a world record for range. Now, with the donut battery, the performance metrics just jump into another dimension.
Let's quantify that jump. Their old charge time was 35 minutes. That is now reduced to under 10 minutes for a full charge. And for the long-range version, they're delivering up to 600 kilometers of real-world range.
Let's just emphasize that range jump for a second. Their old world record was around 350 kilometers. Getting 600 kilometers of real-world range on a motorcycle, that's massive. It kills range anxiety for almost any practical scenario.
The charging speed, though, is the disruptive part. The Verge CEO shared this great story, saying they had to design a slower charging speed so riders could actually enjoy a coffee while waiting. We spent a decade trying to hit 20 minutes, and now the challenge is making it slow enough for a coffee break.
That anecdote captures the psychological shift perfectly. But Verge's role is bigger than just being a launch customer. The sources highlight that Verge is the exclusive channel partner for donut battery tech for the entire two-wheeler industry.
And that's the commercial accelerant, right? That's what scales this beyond just one brand. Why is that so important?
We are talking about global OEMs that produce more than 60 million motorcycles every year. They now have a direct pipeline to this tech through this partnership. Donut Lab isn't trying to sell to the whole world at once. They're using Verge as their validated distribution channel. It takes the tech from a niche product to an entire industry segment overnight.
Okay, moving up in size. Let's look at the automotive side and the partnership with Watt AV. This seems designed to speed up adoption for commercial vehicles.
That's exactly right. This is where Donut Lab is offering a complete foundation, not just a battery. The battery is integrated into Watt AV's ultra-lightweight EV skateboard platform.
And this platform is comprehensive. Aluminum skateboard, fully integrated donut motors, inverters, software Donut OS, and of course the donut battery.
The key takeaway here is the advantage for OEMs. This is a modular platform available to car makers today. Instead of spending 5 years and billions of dollars developing their own bespoke system, they can effectively fast-track their vehicle development.
They're essentially buying a proven, optimized drivetrain ecosystem off the shelf.
Exactly. They get to leapfrog a decade of R&D risk. They can build vehicles that weren't even realistic before because the fundamental constraints of range, weight, and architecture have been removed by this system. It dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for any company wanting to launch a Series EV.
Okay, we've covered two-wheelers and passenger platforms. Next up, heavy transport with the Kova Power Smart Trailer. This seems to be where the immediate financial impact is just huge.
Absolutely. The Kova Power Smart Trailer is a joint venture with Ahola Group, and they're delivering series production electrified trailers. They're using the donut motors, battery, and software to electrify existing trailers and do it quickly.
And the efficiency gains they're quoting are just stunning. Up to 54% reduction in diesel consumption and up to 30% reduction in total energy use.
This is a monumental savings opportunity. Most people focus on replacing the tractor unit, but the trailer is a much easier and cheaper thing to electrify. By adding a lightweight electric axle and a donut battery pack to the trailer, you create a smart trailer that helps push the load. The diesel tractor then operates at a fraction of its normal power needs.
And you think about the scale. Europe has over 3 million trucks. The US has another 3 million. Electrifying trailers, especially retrofitting existing fleets, is an affordable, low-cost way to get massive efficiency gains right now.
That 54% reduction in diesel consumption is a multi-trillion-dollar savings opportunity globally. The return on investment for logistics companies is practically instantaneous. It shifts decarbonization from a massive, slow capital replacement cycle to a smaller, rapid optimization cycle.
And finally, let's look at the ultimate validation of resilience. Defense and mission-critical use with the Isaacs Group. If the battery can perform here, it can perform anywhere.
When you enter the defense sector, the requirements are just on another level. They're deploying the donut battery in defense-grade electric platforms, a tactical buggy, and a next-gen drone.
What makes defense validation so much more stringent?
Safety, reliability, and performance under extreme conditions are labeled as non-negotiable. If a failure means mission compromise or risk to life, the validation threshold is immense. They need to handle ballistic shock, operate from the tropics to the Arctic, and that non-flammability becomes a life-saving feature. You cannot have a vehicle or a drone ignite after taking damage.
So the deployment in these defense platforms really reinforces every claim Donut Lab has made about durability and safety. It's basically the highest stamp of approval you can get. It tells every OEM in the world that this tech isn't just fast and dense, it's trustworthy under the most extreme duress. Okay, so we've seen the specs, we've seen the partners validating the tech in production today. Now, let's zoom out and look at the broader ecosystem Donut Lab is building. The motor, battery, control, the OS, and how the unique properties of this battery make it all possible.
Yeah, we have to spend some serious time on design freedom here because this solid-state architecture lets engineers completely rethink how a vehicle is built. The traditional line-on battery pack, that rigid rectangular block, is the primary constraint in EV architecture today. It dictates everything.
They describe their battery as behaving like clay, which is such a powerful analogy.
It's fantastic because it implies moldability. The battery adapts to the product instead of forcing the product to adapt to the battery. You can create custom cell designs much more easily than with liquid chemistries.
Which means custom sizes, voltages, and geometries.
Yeah.
But the most interesting part of that is structural battery integration.
This is a total paradigm shift. We're going beyond even what companies like Tesla or BYD are trying with cell-to-chassis. Instead of the battery just being a component bolted into the frame, the battery can now be the structure.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, think about the example from the source. The battery serving as the body of a drone or a vehicle chassis element. In a drone, the battery might form the rigid wing structure or the entire fuselage. You're using every cubic millimeter for energy storage while also getting structural rigidity. It dramatically reduces part count and weight.
That structural role unlocks product designs that were, as they say, not even realistic before today. It just removes these fundamental architectural constraints.
And critically, this freedom is only possible because of that zero-compromise platform we've been talking about. If the battery is structural, you can't easily swap it out, so it must have that 100,000 cycle life. If it's structural, it will take damage, so you absolutely cannot have a fire risk. The safety enables the design freedom.
It's a virtuous cycle. The intrinsic safety allows for the design freedom, which then unlocks these radical new products and efficiency gains.
And this is all enabled by the fact that Donut Lab didn't just build a battery, they built a complete vertical stack.
Let's detail that ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's the motor, the software, Donut OS, the battery, and the control units, all designed to work together.
This is a classic platform play designed for maximum synergy. The sources say the parts can be used independently, and over 100 OEMs are already looking at the motor, but together they create something much bigger than the sum of the parts.
That synergy means optimal efficiency. The motor, battery, and controls are all designed to communicate as one flawless system. The software knows the exact state of the solid-state battery at any moment, so it can optimize power output and critically manage that 5-minute fast, charging with incredible precision.
Right. It removes all the guesswork and the safety buffers that a normal battery management system has to build in to protect less predictable ion cells. The ultimate mission of this platform is to help OEMs reimagine what's possible.
They're making the technology so accessible and efficient and cost-effective that using combustion just stops making any logical sense. Which, if we step back, points to this technology being universal, moving way beyond just cars and bikes.
That's right. The zero-compromise performance, the unlimited cycles, the lower cost. This unlocks applications across all industries. This is a foundational technology.
And most dramatically, we have to consider the seismic impact on energy infrastructure.
I mean, if you take a battery that's cheaper than lithium, needs no exotic materials, is intrinsically safe, and offers 100,000 cycles, you have just solved many of the hardest problems facing stationary energy storage.
Let's think about the problems for grid storage today. Fire safety means you need huge, expensive exclusion zones and cooling systems. And the limited cycle life means these massive battery farms need to be replaced every 10 or 15 years.
Those two things make the economics really challenging. The donut battery solves both. No thermal runaway means the farms can be cheaper, denser, and safer. 100,000 cycles means the battery will outlive the power plant it's stabilizing. This unlocks things like high-density data center storage, utility grid balancing to manage solar and wind, and flexible charging infrastructure that can be deployed anywhere without massive grid upgrades.
Grid balancing is enormous. Utilities need huge battery farms for peak shaving, storing solar energy during the day and using it at night. The high cost and limited lifespan of lithium have always been the constraint. If you remove that cycle life constraint, the economics flip instantly.
It makes intermittent power sources like solar and wind dispatchable and reliable at scale. This battery becomes not just a part for cars, but a foundational technology for a modernized, decentralized energy grid. It addresses climate goals from two directions at once: transport and stationary power.
What an incredible deep dive. Just to summarize the massive impact here, Donut Lab claims to have launched a battery that surpasses what most of the industry is still planning to deliver in, 2030 or beyond. And they've done it today, powering actual production vehicles like the Verge Motorcycle, shipping Q1 2026.
The whole list of traditional constraints that defined the electric transition range: anxiety, charging speed, battery degradation, temperature sensitivity, safety risk, high cost, it appears they have been systematically eliminated. And when those fundamental concerns just disappear, the transition to electric mobility stops being an optional shift and becomes, in their words, inevitable.
It really does feel like they've changed the physics and the economics at the same time, forcing the rest of the industry to just scramble to catch up to this new baseline. It reduces risk for every OEM, it accelerates the transition for every logistics company, and it just rewrites the performance specs for every category of EV.
And that brings us to the final provocative thought. We focus a lot on vehicles and that impressive 100,000 cycle life, but I want you to consider the immediate implications for stationary energy storage. If a 100,000 cycle, cheaper than lithium, intrinsically safe battery is available today, how quickly will the economics shift for utility companies? The ones relying on large, expensive battery farms for grid stability. Will the entire investment curve for utility-scale storage be pulled forward by half a decade, collapsing the lifespan expectations for every other competing battery technology? That is the scale of disruption we're facing, starting right now.
A profound thought to mull over as the world prepares for this massive energy shift. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Donut Lab's transformative technology.
Make sure you subscribe for more insights and visit blockrora.com.